Hey everybody, Benzaga here. It's been such a long time since my last update. Just so much has changed. I guess we'll just get right into it. I think last time I was creating a single player game that you were the host, so it was kind of like single player but multiplayer. Over the Christmas break, I had some time, and so I went ahead and took the plunge and went into multiplayer. And it broke all kinds of things. Made me realize I was doing things way differently than I thought. In a legit multiplayer game, like everything ended up being different and refactored and stuff like that. So it's quite a lot of changes. So what you're seeing here is the overworld, and this is where I'm planning on having all the crafting and things like that happen, and equipping of items and stuff. Each player is going to have their own overworld view that they own, and they're going to be able to put different dungeon nodes on there, and which will give them access to different dungeons or like different shops and things like that, like blacksmith shop or like weapon shop and stuff like that. Um, and I'm also planning to implement this thing I'm calling a chaos portal, where you every month or something like that, there might be like a monthly rotation where it's just some random dungeon or some random chaotic thing that you don't expect, or it might be on a cycle, so maybe once every year it'll repeat or something. But I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But in any case, so this is like a dungeon node, and so let's say I want to go into the dungeon. I will click it or tap it. It will give me some options to either do a quick join, solo, or a team. Like if I've got a group that I want to team up with, or some friends or something. And so right now I'm working on the quick mode. So what happens is it joins a lobby and it sees if there's a game there waiting to start, and if not, then it creates one for you. And so you can see here I've got this thing I'm calling a torch buddy, where it basically is your light source. It just kind of follows you around and shines a light for you. So this perspective is a little bit different than last time. I tried a few different movement types. I tried tap to move, drag to move. In the end, I liked this analog concept where it's like an analog stick where I can just anywhere on the screen I want to, I can just drag, and it becomes my analog stick. And so, like if I'm on my phone and I drag right here, and then with my other finger I drag on this side, then this side takes control. So whatever side you're dragging on, it takes control. And then if I tap, it's like an auto use. And so what auto use means is, like, let's say I go up to like a mine or like an ore node, and I tap, it'll just mine because it knows like that's my auto move and that's where I'm looking. So it's based on where you're looking, and so positioning and looking is going to be really important in this game. And so if like I look at this door and I tap, then it'll use my auto move. Or let's say I do have the option of pathfinding, so because this is using the dynamic nav mesh from Unity. And so what I can do is I can also say, like, let's say there's a tree or dungeon or an ore node. I can just tap the ore node, and it'll know that I tapped it, and so it'll path over to it and then start mining it or whatever. And so that's going to be an option that's not in yet. But auto pathing is going to be an option, but not on the ground though. So I can't just auto path to here because it doesn't know. It thinks I want to just auto attack. And so the other thing is, if you long tap, it'll bring up these options of like using different abilities that will be different ability slots, and it will be based on the weapon I'm using. And so, right now it's not set up, but basically the idea is that in the outer world, I will choose. I want in slot A, B, and C. Like maybe I have a sword ability, maybe I have a shield ability, and maybe I have some ability that doesn't use anything. It's just an aura or some AOE ability that I just need a weapon slot. A weapon, doesn't matter what kind of weapon. And so I can just long press and use it, and it'll have the different cooldowns. I'll have to put some indicators somewhere. But yeah, that's kind of the end. So it's just like I can move with one finger, like on this side, and then I can attack on this side, or I can long press on this side and use my abilities, while I'm running. And so, yeah, I mean, the ability might stop me to execute, depending on the ability. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And so you can see that this shader for my light took a step back because when I went to multiplayer, I realized that it wasn't working properly because I was masking everything based on the position that I was, and so I had to like I had to fix that. So yeah, it wasn't working right. Um, so you can see I've got the other player joined here. It's not working for some reason. My movement's broken on it. I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe it's because it's a different version that I'm using. So that might be it. But you can see that she's got a great axe and a skull buddy for her torch buddy. I've got the box buddy, and I'm using like sword and shield. She's using the female mesh. I'm using the male mesh, and so there's a lot of dynamically loading content that's happening now. And you can see that the two torches merge, based on their positioning and stuff like that. And so let's see. So this all starts based on the player prefab, the persistent player prefab. Sorry, Unity keeps crashing on me, and I'm not quite sure why, but anyway. So the persistent player has a reference to the dungeon manager and the character root. Character root is basically your character in game before anything is attached. It's basically got your visual, your physics, which I'm calling proxy. It's got your torch buddy. It's got all your references to different components. It's got and it's got a reference to like the male and female versions of the character. And then for those, this has like a bone map that references the different bones that you can attach to, like offhand, main hand, your biped, and different things like that. And so what happens is it creates your persistent player. The persistent player creates the character root, and then based on your settings or your what you've got, it goes through and it loads your meshes and loads your items and stuff like that. And so the mesh stuff has a whole revamp. What I ended up doing is creating this mesh database, which is based on your skin type. Like if like your bone structure, like if it's male or female. I might have some for like different mobs. Like if I want to give them, if there's different components that I can swap out on them and stuff like that. So it would basically be a different database for each bone structure. And so this one has got 0 for female, 1 for male. The different types of meshes within these different things. So there's lots of different hair and faces and stuff like that. All the different tunics and helms and things. And so the way this works is it uses like a 0, or it has like a bone type or like skeleton type. Then it's got the database of meshes. So it would be like 0, and then like 0 would be for female hair, and then like the index. So like 006 would be that specific mesh. And so the way that I did that is it's currently hard coded based on your auth type. So for example, if I log in with PC, then it means that I'm a male and that I've got certain meshes and certain items. And then if I log in with my Android, then it means I'm a female and I've got certain meshes and certain items. So let me show you how that looks though. So like right here, you can see that there's this thing called a client data. I've got these equipped items. Right now they're strings, but I'm going to change that to some kind of an ID system as well. And then my equipped meshes. So, and it knows my biped is a biped of type male, and which is a 1. And so based on the 100, that means it's male, database 0, and then the mesh 0. And so that's hair, and then hair index 0. And so that's basically how that works. And so this is for the beard, I think. And so I took that off. Or it's either, yeah, I think it's beard. So, and this is what tells it what I'm currently equipped items is like the basic sword, basic shield, and the box buddy. And so if I go to the Google Auth service, then that shows it's the female, and then her items, her meshes, and then the sword or the great axe and the skull buddy. And so that's how that's all determined. And so the way that's all set up is in this player entity. class. And so when you first join the game, it creates that player entity, and then the player entity goes in and makes sure that that it spawns in the player mesh. It waits to make sure that if you're joining late and somebody's already there, then it has to wait for your client ID to be added to the player account. And then, but if it's you, and if your client ID is there in the list, then it just initializes it instantly, and it grabs your client data off of your player data that I add in the lobby. And so, let me show you that real quick. So here, I just basically say, to convert your client data to JSON string, and then I set your client data in the player data as I say visibility member, so then only members of your game can see it. And then I grab the dungeon seed that has been set by the owner, by the host, and then it generates the dungeon, and so that way everybody sees the same thing. And so currently what happens is it grabs your different meshes and then just adds it based on the different things, and it grabs all your items and then it attaches it to the bone reference that is in your different bone references. And so as I may have mentioned earlier, there was this journey as far as like how to do all this, and so we started out in a way different situation, where this is basically just a mesh reference. That's it. Like there's no stats associated with this mesh. It just says, add this mesh to my person. And so my plan is to handle all that in the overworld, where, so for example, when I equip an item, so that item is going to have a mesh reference, but it's going to be a totally separate thing. It's going to be like, item sword 771 or whatever, where it's like, and that sword says, okay, use the item in, item database, index 2, and so it'll say like, it'll say which item to use for visual reference, where the stats of the item are going to be in a total separate place. And so what's cool about this is then what happens is when I'm in the overworld and I'm equipping different items and crafting different items and putting them in the different slots, the stats are just going to be accumulating like on my character, like my character stats. And so then it's going to have different references to the different meshes and different items. And so when I load into the game, it just knows like what my stats are and then what items to equip. It doesn't have to go through and say like, oh, you're using this sword, like you have this much health and you have this much damage, you have this much whatever. And so it's just going to be like one lump sum of like what I've created in the overworld, like what I've entered the dungeon with, which I think is a pretty cool system. So what will happen is when I equip those items, that's when it will modify my stats. And then when I enter the dungeon, it'll just see what my stats are, and it'll just say, oh, he's got, swords at index 2. And so then basically your meshes, all your meshes and all your swords and your weapons are just visual representations of the items that you have equipped, which is just kind of an interesting way to do it, I think. And so, yeah, that's my plan for that. And the other thing was this concept of installers, or initializers, I'm sorry, where you can see here, I didn't want to create direct references to things based on what they were. And so what that means is like I didn't want an axe to know what its animations were. And I didn't want an axe to know like what abilities it has, right? I want those to be separate. So what's going to happen is you will have an ability that will require a weapon type. And so it's not directly linked to the weapon, it's an ability. And so, for example, like let's say I have like a great axe, I have a cleave ability. And so my cleave ability will require a type of great axe. And so it will be an entirely independent thing. And it'll just say, okay, does he have a great axe equipped? Yes. Okay, he can use this ability. And so that's how, that whole system, I'm planning to make that work, is that my abilities will be separate from the items that I use. And so I can mix and match different abilities as long as it meets the requirements. Like let's say I have some kind of a slash ability, and it's like a two-handed slash ability. Maybe I could use a great axe. Maybe I could use a two-handed mace. Maybe I could use a polearm. And so as long as as long as I have the item that ability requires, I can use that ability and I can bring it into the game with me. And so that's just kind of the idea. And so with this separation, I have, so this is a great axe, this is a shield, this is a sword. And so you can see they have these different initializers. So this is a sword initializer. And this is the prefab that it'll bring in. This is basic sword. And so when I go to the initializer, the sword initializer, it says, oh, okay, you have a main hand attachable, like you are a main hand attachable initializer. And so when I go there, it has a reference to the main hand bone. And so what it does is it makes it so like these things are independent of what they do, so it's like I know that it's a sword basic mesh is the item that I'm going to attach, but that's all I know. Like, it doesn't know anything about the bone it's attached to. It doesn't know anything about in this case, this great axe initializer, it has two initializers. It's got the main hand attachable, and it's got a great axe movement. And so when I go to the great axe movement, it has a reference to this great axe movement set. And when I go to there, it's got all the animations. And so you can see that this great axe that I'm spawning in has no idea about anything. It just says, okay, use the great axe initializer and attach this weapon. And this is the weapon I want to use for that. So then you go to the initializer and it says, okay, we want to attach this object to the main hand. And then we say, and then we want to grab the movement of the great axe and we want to use those animations for this weapon. And so you can see here on the sword just has a main hand attach initializer. So it all it knows is it attaches to the main hand. It doesn't know anything about movement or anything like that. But if you go to the shield initializer has an offhand attachable, and it has a shield movement, because the shield, I decided to make the shield is what drives the movement, not the weapon that they have in their hand. And so, for example, if I have a mace in my hand, or an axe in my hand, or a sword in my hand, and I have a shield, the shield is what decides, like, oh, you need to move this way because you have a one-handed and a shield. And so that's kind of why I went in this direction. And then you can see that I've got, these skull buddies, box buddy, these torch buddies, basically, that now they have a little bit more data in there where it's got a light material that's referencing, so like one of them might be a little bit like pink, one of them might be yellow, and then it's got the mesh, and then it's got the torch buddy initializer. So the torch buddy initializer, it has an attachable, and it has a torch buddy light initializer. And so so through these initializers, that's how I can create functionality of these different items. And so the item itself doesn't know anything about what it is. It just knows that, hey, I'm a torch buddy, use the torch buddy initializer, and here I am. And so this is what says, okay, it decides that, so this particular one is the light buddy initializer. So it says, hey, use the player entity set torch buddy light material, and then passing in the light material on my definition. And so if I go here, then it says, okay, so the light render material equals the one that's part of my definition. And so it's like a decoupling of items and meshes based on it's just an item itself. Doesn't have any functionality. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't even know what it's attached to or anything. It just knows this is my initializer. And so that way I can have like 10 great axes, and I can say use the great axe initializer. And I don't have to use like I don't have to sit there and link up something every single time I want to create a new great axe, or every time I want to create a one-handed weapon, you know. And so it's kind of you know, it might seem a little bit confusing, but I really appreciate this route, and this separation between visual representation of items and functionality of stats and stuff like that. And so yeah, that's basically what that is. Let me think. So one other thing that changed, I don't know if you noticed, was in the shader for the torch. When I added multiplayer, I realized that the way that I was doing the shader didn't work with 2 players, because it would create this radial gradient from the root of this person, and then it would block out the other person's light. And so instead of merging the 2 lights, you would only have the one light. And so I'm going to be working on that later, to get that working properly. And so yeah, so I think my next phase of this is working on the actual abilities. And so I don't know if I've actually got anything on there yet. I started working on it and then ended up going, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. I brought in some different effects, so like for like a slash effect, you know, so it's like whoosh. I don't know if you can see that on the video or not, but hopefully it's playing it. And then there's like a stab effect, you know, where it's like just stabbing forward. And so so yeah, this whole ability thing is going to be totally interesting as well, you know, similar to how I've got this the item and mesh installers. So my plan, like I said, was to create the abilities where they're independent of the weapons. And so I might have like a sword slash ability, you know, like forward slash or auto attack slash or something like that, where I can equip that ability in my ability slot, and it will require me to use a sword. And so if I have like a mace, you know, maybe I'll have some kind of an error message that'll appear and says like, hey, you're trying to join this dungeon with an ability you can't use, you know. And so I might have to make it, you know, dumb friendly and stuff like that. But that's kind of the idea, is that I want to have like these 3 active abilities that you can activate, you know, like, so you have auto attack, then you have 3 abilities, and then there's going to be some passive things too that are just like auras, or just like passive abilities that just when you equip them, they just give you these passive stats, or passive you know, non-use abilities, you know. And so yeah, that's kind of my next step here, is you know, is creating this whole ability system to use the different weapons. And then what I want to do is figure out how to separate these things from being hard-coded and bringing them in from like some kind of back end. I know Unity's got some kind of save, you know, client save thing that I might be able to tap into. I don't know how that works yet. I have to look at it. But that's my plan, is I want this to be back end driven. So when I log into my account, it'll pull my client data, and it'll say, oh, he's currently got, you know, either the default meshes or the ones that I've equipped. That means I've got to create slots. You know, I've got to create like your head, you know, where your helm, your body, your arms, or not your arms, your gloves, your legs, and your boots. And so, and then maybe some non-visual slots like rings, you know, and an amulet or something that's like you don't see it, but you can equip it. And so that whole equip process, you know, I have to create that. So slots, equipping things, saving them to some back end, loading them when I log in. You know, I gotta create all that. So I think I'll do that next. You know, so that way it's more legit, like it's actually stored somewhere on the cloud, and like it's not hard coded like this. And then so once I get that done, you know, then I want to work on the abilities, I think, next. And so yeah, I mean, like I said, it's been a lot of work, a lot of refactoring, a lot of trial and error. Iterative development was fun, and I really enjoy it. And yeah, I'm glad it's multiplayer and still single player if I want to just be a single player. So thank you for watching. Let me know if there's any questions you might have, or if you want me to go into further detail about something. and I'll chat with you later.